Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to go over how Longshanks rating works because I feel like it's something that people have asked me about sometimes, especially like locals who don't really fully understand how it works. And then I'm going to tell you, after explaining how it works and showing you a little bit of the math behind it, kind of the way if you really want to, get a high ranking, air quotes, or more so for maybe a particular affiliation badge. What is the best way to do it if you really wanted to like game the system? Now, this is my screen. I have a quote unquote high ranking. A lot of it is you'll as you will talk about it. It'll be because I play in high. I play a lot against a lot of good people because I play in like lunch meets and stuff. Um, and I win enough to make it. You still have to win games, but it's a little, I don't put so much stock into the people with like 90% win rates, and it's so much variability in like where they're playing their games. Are they playing? There's people with 90% win rates who play. I don't know. 90% of their games are local events, monthly events with 8 people in them, and they just win all their games because they're the best person in their local. You know, I don't. There's so much. I don't hold it anywhere. I don't hold myself in super high regard. I think it's fun to look at. I think it's fun to chase badges and stuff like that. But it's more just for like talking shit and fun and games. But I do want to explain how it works because I think some people don't fully understand it, and I think it once you grasp how it works, you can kind of understand the numbers better. Um, so first off, there is a calculation here that is in the help section of Longshanks, but I pulled it out for you here. Don't think too hard about it. I'm going to explain it real quick, each of these three sections, and it'll make pretty good sense. So first off, I think the big thing to note is you kind of drop back to over here. So we'll start here. RPI is what your rating player index, percentage index, whatever. It has four components. The math just says 25% of it is this one, 50% is this, 25% is this. Don't worry about how the math actually, it looks in a formula perspective. And so the three components are your win loss percentage, your win loss percentage of your opponents. So this is the average R of all your opponents. So it's the average win percentage of your opponents. And then it's the average OR, which is the average win percentage of your opponent's opponent. So essentially, if you think about it this way, it is what percent of games do you win? What percent of games do your opponents win? And what percent of games do your opponents win? And the reason it kind of does that is basically say, hey, if you play versus better people, it means more than just winning versus a bunch of bad people. And you also can't like jack up your rating if you're playing against people that have good win percentages, but they only play against people with poor win percentages. Like they're basically, you can't cherry pick off people who are playing only bad people. So it's supposed to kind of level that playing field, and why you'll see sometimes, or why a big part of you know getting a good ranking is not only winning a decent amount of your games, but just playing good people. Like, if you cherry pick good people, I mean, it's half your score. So take for example this. Let's just say, in a perfect, an average rating is 500. That's basically saying you go 50%. We're down here now. You go 50%. Your enemy's about 50%, and that you start playing, you start winning a little more. Let's just say, what's a good win percentage? I have 80. That's on the higher side, I'd say. I'd say anywhere from like 60 to 70%. It's pretty solid. Let's just say you're a 70% winner. If I see somebody with a 70% win rate in Longshanks that has decent events, I'd say that's a solid. Especially because if you're playing good people, you're gonna lose, right? Like if I play the worst people, I can win 95% of my games. But if every couple game, every other game is versus a very solid person, it makes sense to not win 100%. And then say, okay, now let's see how your rating jumped up. Now let's say you play people who are just good. You're just average opponent. Let's say 65%. You're not as good as you, but they're good. Look how much your rating jumps up. So this one is the hardest one to calculate because you don't really know what your opponents are playing. You don't know. You can't really like predict that. But you can go in and say, wow, because this is worth double than your own win percentage. So for example, let's just take this back a second. Let's just say you're 60 and 70. you get 625, but if it's 70 and 60, it's less. It matters more that you play good people than that you beat those good people. That's a very key thing to note, is that you should cherry pick playing against good people, and you should be good enough to at least compete. Like, if you lose all your games, it doesn't really matter how good the opponent you play is. You need to win some of them. But even just winning like 50% of your games versus really good opponents can get a very high ranking. About 600 is where you start. I mean, like, if you just play games, like, you're probably somewhere in like the 500 to 550 range. Like, if you just get enough games to do it, I'd say like upper 50s, low 600s is like where the good players lie. And like, a lot of that will be, you'll see somebody at 650, and like, there's like, our Curtis is up there, and he's really good. Obviously, he wins a lot with Hellfire and stuff. But there's some people who are up there who have like 20 games, and they just happen to play like 20 very good opponents. They have a good win percentage, and then they don't play a lot. Like, if they played consistently all the time, like, I'll give you an example. Like, Jumanji's a great one. Great player. We know he can win events and win big things, but he plays so many events that it kind of dilutes his... It dilutes this thing, where this, like, tends closer to go to 50. So even if you have, like, a 70 or maybe 75% win rate, I don't know what he has. But if his opponents aren't as good, it's always going to scale down to where, like, if you just cherry pick, some really good players, your score would be immensely higher, right? Even though you win less. So I think at some point you just play enough that it doesn't matter. Like, your ranking is bullshit, whatever, anyway. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to say, how do we exploit it and how does it work? Okay, that's the first part. And the second part is this. Don't worry about this equation. It's just a scalar. Essentially saying, this is how your rating is calculated, this percentage based on opponent's win percentage. But until you get 20 games, we're not giving you full credit. You're not going to beat one person who has an 80% win rate. Sorry, have 100%. Have an 80% win rate, and now you have a 775 ranking after one game. We're not going to show that. We're going to scale it by a factor that divides your ranking. It's based on this formula. I did the math for you. Technically, this number diverges to 1, and what Longshanks does is, after you play 20 games, it just cuts it off and doesn't use it anymore, even though it's super small. I think technically it does it after 21 games because of an n=0 error. It should cut it off at 20. But even then, like, at 20 games, like, here's an example. Here's my true, air quotes, Midnight Suns ranking. So here's live, right? So I only have 12 Midnight Sun games. My true ranking, if you click here, it says it up here. An RIP of 653 with a Q of 1.37. So you can see at 12 games, the Q factor is 1.37. Here's the 477. That's what you see here, because I put the 653 up here. So you can see, as I play games, my ranking will scale up and eventually kind of peter off into what the true ranking is. And eventually it'll just cut off and be 1.0. Now, this true ranking will change over time. So one thing to note is, if you play 3 games against good people and your true ranking is like 700, it's going to drop the minute you play more people, because you're going to get more people diluting this 80% or the 100% win rate, stuff like that. So really, until you get to like a decent amount of games, I wouldn't put too much faith in what true ranking is. But some people have come up to me and be like, oh my gosh, my ranking's only 100. I'm like, that's because you don't have 20 games left yet. Unless you get 20 games of ranked, it means nothing. Now you can look and kind of see, like, if you look at my Cabal, right? My Cabal true ranking is, air quotes, is 615. I've only played 7 games, but it's much lower than my Midnight Suns. But my Midnight Suns, I've played against a lot better people. Like, I think Cabal I took to a local event, and some of them aren't very high rated people because they're newer and they don't play very tournaments, but they bring down my average opponent immensely. Whereas, like, my Convocation ranking won't change that much because I've played a lot. Sure, I have a great win percentage. I play decent opponents, but, if we go to the leaderboard, for example, like let's just look. Jim, 656, right? We'll use him. I'll never catch Jim. I have too many games of Convocation at this point. So Jim, who is a great player and a great convocation player, so I'm not saying he's undeserved to be up there. And first off, you do have to go to ranked when you rated events. Sorry, you can't do unrated. So let's just go to rated. All right. He's an 89% win rate. Great. I think I had 80. So he's up there. He's higher than I am. He only has 18 games, too. He doesn't even have the full allotment. He did 80 at 669. He just has really, really good opponents in these 18 games. Not only, I mean, but it kind of comes hand in hand, right? Like, being good at events makes you play better people. So it kind of works in your favor to win games because you win games, you play against better people, which helps your ranking even if you win or lose. It's worse to, like, when you get down to the slumps, it actually hurts you because not only does winning versus bad players not help you, it just doesn't help you that much. Like, their win percentage dragging down this number and this number hurts more than helping your win percentage. So that's how it works. That's the math. That's all this is saying is there's a scalar that brings down your rating until you get to 20 games, and your ranking is heavily based off the opponents you play. That is the key to note here. So I will give you the secret sauce to getting a good ranking. If you really want like a badge, like first off, you can kind of snipe like lower badges, like anything in like the 570s or lower is probably snipeable with like this tactic. Okay, first off, anyone that has like a 650 or something, I think Curtis's is really high, 660. You're never going to catch it because not only does he win a lot, but he plays very good people, and you'd have to like beat the best people. A lot of these people with like the number one, like don't play that affiliation anymore. Curtis is a different one because he plays a lot of it. But some people just get there and then they sit on it. And you can easily sit on it. So like if I got to 20 games of Midnight Suns using this chart, assuming my win percentage and my quality of opponents doesn't change, I'll be at like 650. I mean, what's Midnight Suns is 590-69. I'll be there without 20 games. I could sit there and never play a Midnight Suns game again for a year, and I'd probably never lose the ranking because I play against very good people. I played against Curtis. I'm going to play against Curtis again. Having 2 Curtis games in my 20 games is amazing because he has such a high win percentage. I play people like Leaf and stuff like that. I haven't played in a local event with it. And I'm very tentative not to play in my local event with it because of the lower ranked people. So the key way to do it, if you really want to get a badge, first off, playing 20 rated games is always going to take a long time. So if you don't have a way to get 20 rated games easy, this method is going to be almost impossible to start with. But if you do, the method would be take a dual affiliated list. Take the one that you want to get your ranking up on, and then take some other dual that goes with it that you can use on the side. Or you can just do unaffiliated. And if you're playing against somebody who is not that high, not rated, don't look at their rating, look at their win percentage. Their rated win percentage. If they have a good rated win percentage, like 60, 70% or above, play your main affiliation, assuming you think you can at least compete with them. And then if it's anyone bad, if it's anyone with a bad win percentage, if it's a bad matchup, just play the other affiliation. Now you might lose more games as far as like your total rating or just in that tournament itself. But if you're really just trying to cherry pick for one affiliation, pick good matchups against good players. So, and then just get to 20 games doing that. Hopefully you have like a 70-ish% win rate with it. Like you can't just go and get bodied by all the good players. You still have to be good enough to win these games. But if you cherry pick good people for 20 games, you will have a very probably easily get up there. Let me just see. So I feel like this is probably closer to 55. This is probably, you're going to get closer to maybe 75. How many games do you have to win to be like kind of cool? Like, look at this. Look at this. If you just play people, even if it's 70% average win rate is not that bad. I mean, I have 80. Curtis is like 80 something. Most of the like top players have really good win percentages, like 70s and 80s. And then the people with 60s are good players, but sometimes, again, this is all kind of circumventing of like, are you playing in locals? Are you playing online a lot? Like, are you playing in highly competitive, like lunch meets that Johnny runs? have a lot of good players in them. They're very dense. Like they're probably as hard as TTS cuts to as far as a 5 game stretch goes. But locals aren't as hard as that. So like it depends on the mix of locals. You might get 2 good players at 5 games. But look at this. You could win. You play good players. You win 40% of your games, and you have 587. That takes half of these spots. Maybe not half. Okay, you can at least get on the board for half of these, and you could definitely snatch some of the lower ones. Yeah, you can definitely snatch some of the ones down here. Like Sentinels. Is there even a Sentinel guy who has 20 games? I feel like getting 20 games of Sentinels is the hardest thing that you can do. But yeah. So yeah, just cherry pick good people. Play an off affiliation if they're not highly rated. Don't show them the respect. And only play 20 games, 21 games, and then quit. And then you can keep your leaderboard spot forever if you want the badge. But yeah, that's how the rating works. Pretty simple. If you have any questions on the math, just ask me below. But it's here. This is just a number that scales down to 1 pretty rapidly. Once you get to about 15 games, it's pretty close. I mean, obviously I'm losing 49 points at 15 games, but once you get maybe 16 games, you're kind of in the ballpark of where you're going to be anyway. But don't fret if you have 5 rated games and you're like, my ranking is 30. It's it doesn't mean anything. It just scaled tremendously down. But you can kind of on your dashboard see how it looks by clicking on it. Yeah, just by, I don't know who this is. Who am I on? Jim Gradwell. Yeah, if you just click here, that's his true ranking because he has enough games. Spiders, he doesn't. He has a super high spider rating if he can continue winning every game for the next 15 versus very good opponents. This will scale down just by playing an average people over time. But obviously Jim is a great player. He's the kind of guy you want to cherry pick and make sure you play and can beat him, or at least compete. But yeah, there you go. Now you know. Thanks.